Hey adventurers, so today is going to be another book review. This is going to be for The Dead Zone by Stephen King. This is it's a thriller, it's kind of a mystery in some aspects. There's some paranormal ideas that are played with a little bit, not as much as I'd like, and I'll get into more of that in a second here. And King is known for writing horror. I don't really remember much in the way of horror in this book, but maybe that's just because I don't know what horror is. So anyways, we'll get right into this review here, but I'd quickly like to say before I do that if you're liking what you're seeing from an Erudite adventure, we'd really appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe, and we will get right back into this. So, this is an interesting book for me. It was my first Stephen King book that I read, and all I really knew going into this book was that he writes a lot of horrors and thrillers. And so that's kind of what I expected from this book, and I didn't really know what else to expect beyond that. The first part of this book leading up to the incident was great. I was very invested in the story. I thought it was moving fast. I thought there was some interesting ideas being played with already just right at the beginning. It was flowing fast, it read really quickly. It was exactly what I was hoping for. But after that it kind of slowed down and I just about lost all interest in the book. Things did start to pick back up again in the last third. There was obviously things were continuing to happen between that first, 50, 60 pages, something like that, and then that last third. There were some definitely things happening and going on, and the book didn't completely stop, but it did, I don't know what it was about it that just, if it was the way that it was written or the way that the story was being told or whatever, but I just kind of lost all interest in it for a good chunk of time there, and that's largely what made it take me 4 months to read the book. So as I mentioned, things did start to pick back up in that last third, and I was hoping to see some cool explorations of the paranormal aspects of this book, but that didn't really end up being what the story was about, and that's maybe my own misconception about King's writing, or maybe that was the book not being for me. We'll kind of get to more of an answer on that towards the end of the video here. I really liked a lot of things about it. There's a lot of great things that I have to say about this book and that I can say about this book. I really liked the writing style. As I already mentioned, that first, I don't know how long it was leading up to the incident, that was very engaging. I thought it read really quickly. I really flew through that. I think I read most of that. I think I read the first chapter one night, and then I read the next chunk of that book the next day or something like that, and it just went really quickly. I thought King had a very engaging and accessible style that really helped me to make good progress when I would sit down and actually read. I have a hard time making time to physically read at the moment, and that's part of what made it take so long to get through the book. But I could, when I could sit down, I could make some serious progress in the book and read a good chunk of it at a time. I like the setup and the idea of this story, and the way that Johnny can see people's futures and pasts, and then how he is forced to use that in ways that maybe he doesn't really want to. I also liked seeing him struggle with whether he should or even wants to use this ability. And those are all some great things, some great ideas that were being played with. The problem is, I don't know if I liked the story itself, or at least where the story ended. I kept hoping for something a little more than what we got. There was some dark, graphic things being used to tell the story, and some of it worked really well, and others just seemed gratuitous and unnecessary. There's at least one chapter in the book that you could completely remove and it wouldn't affect the story whatsoever. You could just cut it out, pretend that chapter doesn't exist, or just delete it entirely, and the story would still be exactly the same. So the chapter, and there may be other moments where you could do some similar things or severely edit them, and it would help a lot. But there's one chapter at least that you could just delete it and it wouldn't affect anything at all. There's also quite a bit of adult content and language in this book. If it's in the service of the story, it doesn't bother me that much. I don't love it, but it doesn't bother me that much. But a lot of what was in this book just seemed to be there because King wanted it to be there, not because it needed to be there, and not because it served the story. And I can't appreciate that. I don't, and I can't. And it's just the way that I tell stories and the way that I look at storytelling, it doesn't need to be there, and so it shouldn't have been there. And that's kind of weird. So I don't know who I've talked about this with. I don't know if I've talked about this on the channel, but I'm a big proponent for the author telling the story that they want to tell. Not that means don't edit things out that don't need to be edited out, or that the author really wants in there, or anything like that. But at the same time, there's a difference between telling the story that the author wants to tell and having things that are unnecessary. And that's what I feel like so much of the time was in this book. It was things that were just completely unnecessary. So the ending also didn't really work for me, and I've heard that that's not an uncommon opinion regarding King's books. But it wasn't that it was poorly written or maybe even poorly thought out. That wasn't the issue. It didn't explore the ideas, and especially the paranormal side of the story, nearly as much as it could and, in my opinion, should have. So while I didn't hate the book by any means, it will definitely never be a favorite of mine. And I do plan to still read other King books at some point. I wouldn't mind reading it. I wouldn't mind reading the Dark Tower series. In fact, I plan to read the Dark Tower series at some point. There's several other books of his that I do plan on reading, but at the moment he's just not a priority, and that's kind of unfortunate because he is such a massive, influential author and very, very prominent. There's, I guess, so like books like Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, those ones are probably ones that I would read. Maybe 11/22/63, I think is what that one's called. So there's definitely plenty that I would love to read still, and that I'm very interested in reading. But it's just kind of put a damper on my desire to read any King after reading this one that I've heard is a good starting place for King. And maybe I just read the wrong websites when I was looking into this. I guess I'll give you a little more information and backstory on this book. So right at the start of our channels, 3 years ago now, we looked into what are some good books to, we were going to do a book haul. We were going to buy some books and talk about them on the channel. And so one of the things that I looked into was Stephen King and what's a good starting place for Stephen King. And so I heard the website told me that The Dead Zone was a good place to start. And so I was like, okay, I'll do The Dead Zone. It sounds kind of interesting. I like the premise from what I remembered of it. So I've had the book since really the beginning of the channel, and then I never read it, and I never got to it. And finally, in October of 2022, Bookish Drummer Jake mentioned that he was doing a read-along for this book in October, for basically like a Halloween read-along. And I was like, oh well, I've been needing to get to it anyways. I've been wanting to get to it sometime this year, and I had it on the MBR or TBR for a while, and so it was kind of one of those ones that I was like, this is a good opportunity for me to read this and see what I think of King. And I know Kate had read some King and had liked some of it, and so I was like, all right, we'll see what happens with this one. And I never got to it for so long, and then I started reading it, and I didn't finish it in October, and I didn't finish it in November, and I didn't finish it in December, and I finally finished it in January. And I forced myself to finish it in January. I had about 400 pages left of the book in January, and that's a lot of physical reading for me. But because it read so fast, I was able to do it, and I'm glad that I finished it. I'm glad that I've read it. Probably won't. I doubt that I'll ever reread The Dead Zone, but I do plan on reading other King at some point. Anyways, I will leave that there. That has been my review of The Dead Zone by Stephen King. Thank you guys for watching. In Erudite Adventure, we post videos every Monday and Thursday, and have our social medias linked in the description down below. We will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.